The night before my son's wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, his fiancée intercepted me and, smiling as if nothing mattered, leaned in and whispered, "Starting tomorrow, you won't be part of this family." Her words hit me like a blow. The memory album I'd spent months making sagged in my trembling hands. I went home that night and stayed there. Only hours later, the ceremony fell apart in a way none of us saw coming. After 25 years of raising my son Gabriel alone, sacrificing everything imaginable, that woman told me with utter calm that I no longer had a place in his life. My name is Sandra Miller, and for 25 years I was both mother and father to Gabriel. When my husband walked out, Gabriel was just 5 years old, clutching the stuffed dinosaur he carried even to bed. I still remember our first night alone, when he looked up at me with those wide eyes and asked, "Mom, when is Dad coming home?" I swallowed my tears, forcing a smile, and told him sometimes people have to follow different paths. From then on, year after year, I woke at 5 a.m. to get him ready for school before running to my first shift at the clinic where I worked as a receptionist. Afterward, I went straight to my second job at a big grocery store until late at night. Many times I was so exhausted I fell asleep before even taking off my shoes. But I always saved enough energy to listen to him talk about his day, to help with homework, to cheer from the sidelines at his school soccer games. I saved every penny I could. I gave up new clothes, cut my own hair, even sold my car to cover his college tuition when scholarships weren't enough. When Gabriel graduated from law school, I felt I had fulfilled the silent promise I made to that scared little boy. He would have every opportunity, no matter what I had to sacrifice. When Gabriel introduced me to Allison 3 years ago, I really tried to like her. She was beautiful, sophisticated, articulate, everything I adventurous never was. She worked at a prestigious advertising firm and was always impeccably dressed. Gabriel was smitten, his eyes lighting up every time she entered the room, and all I wanted was to see him happy. But from the start, there was something about Allison that unsettled me. Her smile faded the moment Gabriel turned his back. Her tone with me dripped condescension, as if speaking to me were an act of charity. At family gatherings, she monopolized attention with tales of international travel and celebrity clients, rarely showing interest in my life or Gabriel's childhood stories. "How cute," she would say with a dismissive laugh whenever I mentioned the past, as if speaking to a child. For Gabriel's 30th birthday, I baked the chocolate raspberry cake I'd made for him every year since he was 12. It was our tradition. When I brought it to the party, Allison took the plate from my hands with a stiff smile. "Gabriel's on a low-carb diet now, Sandra, but thanks for the effort." The cake sat untouched in the kitchen while Gabriel, unaware, nibbled on the gourmet canapés she'd ordered. I swallowed my pride, as I always did. I told myself she came from a different world, that she couldn't understand our simple traditions. Deep down, I hoped time would bring us closer, that she would eventually see me as family. Their engagement came quickly, just a year after they started dating. Gabriel beamed as he told me he had proposed over an elegant seaside dinner. I forced a smile, hugged him tightly, said how happy I was, while inside me stirred an inexplicable sense of loss. Through all the wedding preparations, I was excluded entirely. No invitations to tastings, no cake decisions, no florist visits, no involvement in anything. When I gently asked if I could help, Allison replied, "Don't worry about a thing, Sandra. We've hired the best professionals. You just need to show up looking nice that day." The night before the wedding, I decided to make one last effort to build a bridge. I prepared an album filled with photos and memories from Gabriel's first steps to his law school graduation. Each page told a story of love and perseverance. I arrived at the rehearsal dinner with the album wrapped in silver paper. Allison intercepted me at the door, her rehearsal dress shimmering under the lights. "Oh, you came," she said with a shallow smile. "Of course I came," I answered, holding out the package. "I made this for you two. Thought you might look through it together tonight, before the big day." That's when she leaned closer, her expensive perfume filling my space, and whispered words that would haunt me forever. "Starting tomorrow, you're just history to this family. You've done your part raising Gabriel. Now he's my husband, my family, and you're just extra baggage. Don't embarrass yourself clinging to him." I froze, stunned. Before I could respond, she continued, "Actually, maybe it's best if you don't show up tomorrow at all. Spare us the drama, Sandra. It's not like anyone's really expecting you." I don't remember how I walked out. I don't remember driving home. I only remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the deep blue dress I had bought just for the wedding, as silent tears slid down my face. That night, I made a decision I never thought I would. For the first time in Gabriel's life, I would not be there for him. I would not attend the wedding. That choice, which felt like final surrender, turned out to be the catalyst for a devastating truth no one was prepared for. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect weather every bride dreams of. I woke before the alarm, years of early mornings wired into my body like an internal clock. For a moment, I moved on autopilot, brewing coffee, taking the dress off its hanger, setting out the shoes I had bought especially for the occasion, simple but elegant, the kind of shoes a proud mother would wear to her son's wedding. Then Allison's words returned like a punch to the gut. "You're just extra baggage." I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling around my coffee cup, as the morning sun cast patterns on the tile floor I had installed myself years ago when I couldn't afford a contractor. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from relatives and friends, all on their way to the church, all asking where I was. I ignored every one. After an hour, Gabriel called. I let it go to voicemail, unable to hear his voice without breaking. His message was filled with worry, confusion. "Mom, where are you? Everyone's waiting for you. Please, call me." I deliberately let him down. The pain was almost physical, tearing something vital inside me. But Allison's words had ripped open a wound I'd ignored too long. For years I had put Gabriel's needs above my own. I swallowed insults, endured condescension, all in the name of love for my son. But that morning something different stirred inside me, a voice saying, "You deserve respect too. You deserve dignity." I was choosing myself over my son. At 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was my sister, Linda, still in her wedding clothes, her face a mix of worry and irritation. "Sandra, what the hell are you doing? Everyone's looking for you. The ceremony starts in an hour." I motioned her inside, unable to speak through my tears. We sat in the living room, the deep blue dress still hanging on the closet door like a ghost of what should have been. "I'm not going," I finally said. Linda looked at me as if I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. "Not going? It's your only son's wedding. Allison told me that after the wedding I won't be part of his family anymore. She told me not to come today." My sister's face drained of color, indignation replacing her confusion. "She said that to you? Looked you in the eye and said that?" I nodded, the last of my restraint breaking as tears streamed down. "She called me extra baggage, said I'd done my part and now needed to step off stage." Linda sank heavily beside me, taking my hands in hers. For a long moment, only the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence. "Oh, Sandra," she whispered finally, her voice thick. I always knew something was wrong with that woman. She loved him in her own way. You kept clinging to a last spark of hope for Gabriel's future. No, Linda shook her head firmly. Love doesn't treat people like that. Love doesn't exclude. Love doesn't humiliate. As we talked, my phone kept buzzing with messages and calls. Gabriel's voice grew increasingly desperate, friends confused, while Allison's family remained curiously silent. At exactly 11 o'clock, the church bells rang in the distance. I imagined guests taking their seats, Gabriel nervous at the altar, Allison preparing in a side room, probably satisfied with my absence. This was supposed to be the beginning of my fade into the background of Gabriel's life, tolerated on holidays and birthdays, always kept at arm's length. But fate had other plans. Shortly after noon, when the bells should have been ringing to bless a newlywed couple, my phone rang again. It was Linda, who had reluctantly gone back to the church at my request. Her voice shook so much I could barely make out her words. The wedding didn't happen. My heart stopped. What do you mean it didn't happen? Gabriel found out. Oh God, Sandra, it's terrible. He found out everything about Allison just before the ceremony. The ground seemed to vanish beneath me. He found out she'd been cheating with her boss for months. And there's more, much more. Her family is bankrupt, Sandra. They needed Gabriel's money to save themselves. The prenup Allison insisted on? It was a trap to funnel his future earnings into their accounts. The world spun as the pieces fell into place. The offhand comments about Gabriel's future salary, Allison's insistence on controlling every financial detail. I remembered how, during their engagement, Allison's father had looked at me with that enigmatic smile and said, "Your struggle is over, Sandra. Now it's our turn to take care of Gabriel." It wasn't love. It had never been love. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to exploit everything my son had worked so hard for, everything we had achieved together. How is Gabriel? This was all I could manage, my own voice barely recognizable. There was a long pause, filled only by Linda's unsteady breathing. Devastated, she finally answered, but also determined. You should have seen him, Sandra. When he confronted Allison in front of everyone, he was different, like he had finally woken from a long sleep. When I hung up, I sat frozen, trying to process it all, the wedding that never happened, the betrayal, the financial scheme. And in the middle of it, my absence, the thing that should have broken me, ended up being the one thing that spared me from witnessing my son's public humiliation. Bitterly, I thought, maybe I should thank Allison for shutting me out that day. The hours that followed passed in a feverish blur. My phone rang endlessly, each call bringing more details about the disaster at the church, guests leaving in shock, Allison's family scrambling to spin stories, blaming Gabriel for abandoning her at the altar. And at the center of the storm, my son, whom I still hadn't spoken to directly. Around 3 p.m., a loud knock at the door jolted me. I opened it to find Gabriel standing there, still in his wedding suit, tie undone, eyes red. Without a word, he stepped inside and wrapped me in a hug so tight it nearly knocked the air from me. "Mom," he whispered into my hair, "did you know?" My heart clenched. "Know what, son?" "About Allison, about who she really is." I pulled back gently, looking into his eyes. I knew she didn't want me around. I knew she didn't respect me. But no, Gabriel, I didn't know about the cheating or the financial schemes. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "She told you not to come, didn't she? That's why you weren't there." I couldn't lie. The night before, she told me that after the wedding I wouldn't be family anymore. She said it was better if I didn't show up. His face darkened, a new wave of pain and anger crossing his features. "And you believed her? You believed I would let that happen?" The question struck like lightning. Me, after all those years raising him, knowing his heart better than anyone, and I had really believed he would let me be erased? The truth burned. I did believe it. Not because I doubted you, but because I saw the hold Allison had on you, the way you seemed blind whenever she was near. She turned you into someone I barely recognized. He collapsed onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. "I know," he murmured through his fingers. "I know." I sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What happened at the church? I want to hear it from you." Gabriel drew a deep breath, as if summoning strength. "Robert, my godfather, got photos of Allison with her boss, Mark. Recent photos just 2 weeks ago. There was no mistaking what was happening." He swallowed hard. "Robert showed me minutes before the ceremony. At first I didn't believe it. Thought it was some misunderstanding or old pictures from before we met. But no, the date was right there, printed on the corner, and she was wearing the bracelet I gave her on our last anniversary." His voice cracked. I confronted her in the dressing room. First, she denied everything. Then she said it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. But then, her cousin Madison, drunk on champagne and nerves, let slip something about the prenup, about how Allison's father had celebrated the night before, saying all their financial troubles would be solved after tomorrow. I closed my eyes, feeling the crushing weight of the betrayal my son had endured. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a trap, a web of lies spun by the very people who were supposed to love him. Gabriel's voice steadied as he continued. "I realized it was never about me. It was about what I could provide. My future career, my salary, my connections, it was all just part of the plan." "What did you do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. A sad smile flickered across his lips. "I walked to the altar, not to marry, but to announce the cancellation. I told everyone Allison had betrayed me, that it was over. I pictured it my reserved son, standing before 200 guests, laying bare his pain. The bravery of it left me speechless. Her family lost their minds," he went on. "Allison's father threatened me in front of everyone, told me I had no idea who I was up against. Her mother screamed that I had humiliated their daughter. And Allison? She completely changed. Every trace of sweetness and grace vanished. She called me a coward, said I was overreacting, that everyone cheats, that I was destroying the best thing that had ever happened to me." I squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry, son." He gripped mine tightly, his eyes locking on mine. "Do you know what hurt the most? Not the betrayal, not even the financial scheme. It was realizing she wanted to separate me from you, make you disposable. When you're the one who gave me everything, who never once abandoned me." His voice cracked. The tears I had been holding back since the moment he walked through the door finally spilled over. "Oh, Gabriel, when you didn't see me today, at first I was furious. I thought you had abandoned me just when I needed you most. But now I understand. She made you believe that's what I wanted. I never should have trusted her. I should have been there for you. No matter what she said." Gabriel shook his head. "No, Mom. Maybe it was better this way. You didn't have to witness that circus. And in some strange way, your absence made me see more clearly. When I realized the one person I could always count on wasn't there, I started questioning everything else." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the birds outside and the phone we both ignored. "What happens now?" I asked. Gabriel ran his hands through his hair, a habit he had since childhood whenever he was thinking. "I'm not sure. I have to handle the practical things, canceling the honeymoon, returning gifts, and I doubt her family will let this go easily. We'll face it together, I said, a new sense of resolve rising in me. No matter what. Gabriel smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. Together, he agreed, tightening his grip on my hand. That night, while Gabriel slept in the bedroom I had kept just as he left it years ago, I sat on the back porch and stared at the stars. The pain of knowing my son had to endure this cut deep. But somewhere inside I felt a strange sense of relief, as though we had escaped something worse than a broken wedding. Years of manipulation, isolation, financial and emotional exploitation. I had no idea the story was far from over. In truth, what happened that day was only the prelude to a much larger battle, a battle that would test not just our endurance, but our dignity and who we truly were. By the following week, I had started calling it the wedding that wasn't, and then the storm I had dreaded finally struck. At first, it was whispers, small ripples in our tight-knit community. But almost overnight, it became a tidal wave. Allison's version of the story spread across social media. She painted herself as a heartbroken bride abandoned by a weak groom who had fallen under the sway of a possessive mother. She posted a photo of herself in her wedding dress, makeup, artistically smeared, with the caption, "Some people don't know when to step back. Some mothers can't cut the cord." Comments flooded her page. Strangers offered sympathy. Friends demanded to know what kind of man abandons his bride at the altar and what kind of mother meddles in her grown son's love life. Her story was emotional, persuasive, and entirely fabricated. "Ignore it," I told Gabriel when he showed me the posts, his face pale with anger. "The people who matter know the truth." But soon we realized it wasn't that simple. My grandmother used to say, "Lies have long legs," and Allison's lies were running a marathon. I began noticing strange looks in the grocery store, hushed conversations stopping when I walked into the pharmacy. An old high school friend texted, asking if it was true I had ruined the wedding out of jealousy. Even the priest from the church where Gabriel once studied catechism asked me to meet privately to talk about letting children follow their own paths. Outrage quickly gave way to something worse, shame. Not because I believed her lies, but because after all those years of quiet sacrifice, of preserving my dignity through hardship, I was now being cast as the villain in someone else's story. Gabriel was fighting his own battles. A partner at the law firm, an old friend of Allison's father, began questioning his judgment and emotional stability. Clients he had worked so hard to secure suddenly hesitated to continue. And then, on a gloomy Thursday morning, 10 days after the failed wedding, the final blow landed. A formal letter arrived at my home, addressed to me. With shaking hands, I tore it open to find a lawsuit. Allison's family was suing me for defamation, emotional distress, and the most absurd charge of all interference with contractual relations. I immediately called my best friend Clara, a paralegal at a large law firm downtown. Clara arrived right after her shift, her face grim as she scanned the documents. "This is just intimidation, Sandra," she said, dropping the stack of papers on my kitchen table. "They're trying to scare you. Contract interference is just a fancy way of saying you ruined their financial plan." "Financial plan?" Clara looked at me, stunned. "You really don't know, do you? Allison's family is nearly bankrupt. Her father has lost millions over the past few years in failed investments. They were counting on this marriage to save them." The revelation hit me like a stone in the gut. There had never been love, not from the beginning. It had always been about money, control, financial security. And by refusing to attend the wedding, One small act of self-preservation after years of humiliation, I had unknowingly handed Allison the perfect opportunity to flip the narrative. She couldn't be seen as an unfaithful, calculating bride, so she painted me as the bitter, controlling mother who couldn't let go, a masterstroke in the dirtiest sense. The next day, Gabriel received a similar letter. He came home pale, slamming the papers on the table. "They're threatening to sue me too. Allison's father said if I don't clear their name publicly, he'll drag you to court and destroy you financially." My heart clenched. Gabriel was fresh out of law school, still paying off student loans, his career just beginning. Even a baseless lawsuit could drain him dry before he ever had a chance to stand. "What will you do?" I asked, bracing for his answer. Gabriel's jaw tightened, his eyes blazing with a determination that reminded me of the little boy who once stood up to bullies for his disabled friend. "I'll fight, Mom. I'll fight for both of us." That night I couldn't sleep, replaying something Allison once told me in her trademark smug tone. "You don't understand how the world works, Sandra. Perception is everything. People believe what they see, not what's true." She had been right about one thing: perception matters. People believed her because she played the victim too well. If perception was her weapon, then we had to fight with truth. Not whispered in shadows, but out loud, in the open. And I knew we had enough ammunition. The next morning, I tore through my small home office, gathering every piece of evidence I had kept, almost by instinct, over the years. Emails Gabriel had forwarded me where Allison spoke of her financial expectations for their future. Screenshots of texts where she criticized him for wanting to do pro bono work instead of chasing real money. And most important of all, a copy of the predatory prenup, so blatantly one-sided any judge would see it for what it was. When Gabriel came home from work, I spread everything across the living room table. "Look," I said, "we have weapons, the truth." He nodded, studying the documents carefully. "We've got evidence, but how do we use it? If we just go public, they'll claim we're bitter and retaliating." He was right. We needed a strategy. Clara gave us the answer the next day. "I know an investigative journalist, Paul Mendez. He specializes in exposing financial fraud and corporate schemes. If you've got the evidence, he can turn it into a real story." It was the perfect idea. A professional investigation would carry weight our voices never could. More importantly, it would shift the story from family drama to financial fraud, exactly what it was. Paul met us in a small downtown cafe. A stocky man with salt and pepper beard and piercing eyes, he listened silently, jotting notes here and there. "What you've got is powerful," he finally said. "Especially the prenup and the financial records. But I'll need independent corroboration." Over the next 2 weeks, Paul worked tirelessly digging into the family's financial history, interviewing former employees, even securing an anonymous statement from a banker who had handled their accounts. Meanwhile, Allison escalated her campaign. She gave a tearful interview to a local magazine, claiming I had poisoned Gabriel against her for years, unable to accept another woman in his life. Her family started calling Gabriel's workplace, hinting he was emotionally unstable, unfit for legal work. The pressure was suffocating. Gabriel came home more exhausted every day, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, and I hardly dared leave the house, haunted by the stares and whispers of neighbors I had known for decades. Then, exactly 1 month after the canceled wedding, Paul's exposé ran in the most respected newspaper in the region, with an even more detailed online version. The headline, "Behind the Broken Wedding, the Allison Family's Financial Schemes." The article spanned 2 full pages, sharp and precise as a scalpel. It detailed their bankruptcies, unpaid loans, quiet fraud settlements. It included independent legal analysis, concluding the prenup was exploitative and unethical. And yes, it even mentioned the affair, with blurry but unmistakable photos of Allison and her boss at an upscale restaurant. The reaction was explosive. Online comments no longer targeted me or Gabriel, they turned on Allison and her family. So she needed money, not love. Poor mother. Imagine raising a son alone all those years, only to be treated like that. The Allisons are nothing but gold diggers. The tide had shifted. The truth, once laid bare, accomplished what our words alone never could. That evening, Gabriel and I sat on the back porch, sipping tea. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. There was still exhaustion, but now a glimmer of hope. "Do you think it's over?" I asked. Gabriel stared at the stars for a long time before answering, "I don't know. They're cornered now. Desperate people do desperate things, but at least we finally have a weapon to match theirs truth against. Lies." I nodded, understanding what Gabriel hadn't said aloud. The battle might not be over, but this time we had a real chance to win. And more importantly, we had each other. The bond Allison had tried so hard to sever was now stronger than ever. What I didn't know, sitting peacefully on the porch that night, was that her family still had one last move, reckless and bold beyond imagination, and it would change our lives forever. The calm after Paul's article was published felt like the eye of a storm, a brief, deceptive peace before the next wave of chaos hit. For 2 weeks, Gabriel and I could breathe a little easier. The judging stares lessened. Messages of support started trickling in. Even a few clients who had left Gabriel's law office returned, admitting they had been misled. I should have been wary of the silence from Allison's family. People like them don't vanish when exposed. They strike back in ways you could never anticipate. And their retaliation came on an ordinary Wednesday morning, while Gabriel was in court and I was grocery shopping. My phone rang an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me answer. "Mrs. Sandra Miller?" a formal male voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is Detective Martin from the City Police Department. We need you to come down to the station immediately to give a statement." My heart froze. A statement about what? Silence. Then the shuffle of papers. "We have a formal complaint filed against you for extortion, blackmail, and threats against the Allison family." The grocery bag slipped from my hands, oranges rolling across the supermarket aisle. "That's absurd. I strongly advise you to bring an attorney." His voice softened slightly. I left everything behind and drove home in shock. My hands shook so badly I could barely open the front door. Once inside, I immediately called Gabriel. Hearing the tremor in my voice, he left. Court mid-session, and rushed home. By the time he arrived, an official envelope from the police had already been delivered to the doorstep, a subpoena listing the full charges. According to the complaint, I had threatened to expose fabricated information about the Allisons unless they paid me a large sum to remain silent. This is completely fabricated. Gabriel shouted, his face flushed with anger as he read the document. "They're trying to criminalize the fact that we exposed the truth. How can they just invent accusations like this?" He raked his hands through his hair, frustration choking his words. "To open an investigation, they don't need much. They can fake emails, splice recordings, anything to make it look credible." My voice was barely a whisper. "But what about me?" Gabriel gripped my hands tightly. "Now we fight, not just for our reputation, but for your freedom." The next morning we went to the police station. Gabriel had stayed up all night preparing our initial defense while I sat beside him at the kitchen table, recalling every detail of my interactions with Allison's family. The station was an old, imposing building downtown. As we climbed the steps, I noticed a cluster of reporters gathering. Someone had leaked the story. "Say nothing," Gabriel murmured, placing a protective arm around me as we hurried past the cameras. Detective Martin was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and an unreadable expression. He led us into a small interrogation room. For me, it was surreal. Never in my life had I sat on the other side of the law. "Mrs. Miller, are you aware of the charges against you?" he asked, after switching on a recorder. "Yes," I answered, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "And they're completely false," Gabriel interjected in his professional tone. "Please note that my mother vehemently denies all allegations, and we are prepared to cooperate fully with this investigation, confident that the truth will prevail." The questioning lasted 2 grueling hours. I was interrogated about every encounter I'd had with Allison and her family, about why I hadn't attended the wedding, about my true motives for contributing to Paul's article. I answered honestly, but the more I spoke, the more I realized his tone wasn't neutral. It was as if he'd already made up his mind, just going through the motions. When we finally left, Gabriel muttered tensely, "He's not impartial. Someone got to him first." My stomach sank. "You think Allison's family has connections in the police?" "Maybe not directly," Gabriel said, "but her father has enough money and influence to open doors. And desperate people don't care about ethics." In the days that followed, things worsened. The leaked story filled local newspapers but twisted. Mother accused of blackmailing son's ex-fiancé's family. My name and photo were everywhere. The small salon where I worked part-time called to politely suggest I take leave until things settled. Neighbors who had begun greeting me again after Paul's article now averted their eyes. The isolation was crushing. One night, sitting at the kitchen table reviewing documents with Gabriel, I broke down in tears. "Maybe we should give up," I whispered. "Maybe we should just say what they want, retract everything publicly." Gabriel set down the papers and took my hands. "Mom, look at me." His eyes were steady, fierce. "That's exactly what they want to break us, to make you doubt the truth, to push you so far into despair you'll sign anything just to make it stop. But we can't let them win." My voice cracked. "But what if they succeed? What if I'm arrested for something I didn't do?" He shook his head firmly. "That's not going to happen. We have the truth. And now we have something else." "What?" A tired smile flickered across his face. "Help. Paul the journalist is furious about this attempt to criminalize the press. He's digging into Detective Martin's connections with the Allisons. And Clara convinced her boss, one of the top criminal lawyers in the city, to take our case pro bono." I felt a spark of hope. We weren't alone anymore. The following week, the tide shifted unexpectedly. Paul released a new exposé, this time focusing on the questionable methods used in my case. He discovered that Detective Martin's son worked for one of the last remaining Allison-owned companies, a clear conflict of interest conveniently left undisclosed. At the same time, our lawyer, David, filed a formal motion demanding forensic testing of all so-called evidence against me. The pressure began to turn back, this time on Allison's family and the system they'd tried to manipulate. 3 days later, David called, his normally calm voice trembling with emotion. "The prosecutor's office is considering dropping the case. The evidence won't withstand scrutiny, and they don't want the embarrassment of pursuing such an obviously fabricated charge." Gabriel and I hugged each other, crying with relief. But David continued. "There's a condition. The Allisons are offering a deal. They'll withdraw all criminal charges if you sign a public retraction of Paul's article and agree to a permanent confidentiality agreement." I looked at Gabriel, rage boiling in my chest. Even now, cornered, they still wanted to silence us, to force us to deny the truth. "No," I said firmly, startling even myself with the strength in my voice. "I will not lie to save their reputation. I will not deny the truth." Gabriel nodded, pride lighting his face. "David, tell them our answer is no. We're ready to go all the way." It was a dangerous gamble. We were daring a powerful, desperate family to do their worst. But something had changed in me. The fear that had paralyzed me days earlier was gone, replaced by iron resolve. My whole life I had bent, adjusted, sacrificed my dignity to make others comfortable. Not anymore. And when our refusal reached the Allisons, something astonishing happened. They backed down. 2 weeks later, the case was officially dismissed for lack of evidence. Detective Martin was removed from the file due to his conflict of interest. And even more surprising, Allison and her family vanished almost overnight, moving somewhere far away to escape the stain of their name and reputation. The storm had finally passed, though as we discovered in the months that followed, it left behind both destruction and growth. It's strange how some experiences carve themselves into you, not only changing who you are but how you see the world. In the months after the case was closed, I felt it deeply. The initial relief gave way to a more complicated healing process, one that was both liberating and painful. The hardest part was accepting that even with public vindication, some wounds would never fully heal. Some neighbors remained distant. Certain friendships never recovered. Doubt, once planted, is a stubborn seed. Gabriel faced his own challenges, though his law career eventually moved forward without the shadow of false accusations. Still, the emotional trauma of Allison's betrayal left him cautious, reserved. He threw himself into work with an intensity that sometimes worried me, as if he could erase memories through sheer effort. "You need to give yourself time," I would whisper on nights when I found him still hunched over legal briefs at 2 a.m., eyes red with fatigue. "Pain doesn't go away just because you pretend it's not there." He would always answer with that tight smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy." Yet amid the shadows, there were genuine moments of light. One night, about 6 months after it all, we sat on the porch watching a summer storm roll in. The air was heavy. Lightning flickered in the distance. "Isn't it strange?" Gabriel said suddenly. Looking back now, I see all the signs with Allison that I ignored: the way she talked about money, how she tried to cut me off from people who really cared, how she reacted whenever I mentioned pro bono cases. "Signs are easier to see in hindsight," I murmured. "But it's more than that." He turned to me, his eyes serious in the porch light. "I wonder why I ignored them, why I wanted so badly to believe in her that I was willing to sacrifice people and things that truly mattered." It was a question I had asked myself countless times but never dared to voice. Why had my intelligent, sensitive son fallen so completely under someone like Allison's spell? "I think I was trying to fill something," he continued, words slow, as if discovering the truth as he spoke. "After Dad left, I always felt broken, incomplete, and Allison looked so perfect, so whole. I thought being with her would make me whole too." My heart ached. All those years I had tried to shield him from the pain of abandonment, and yet she had still found a way in. "Gabriel, you were never incomplete. Never." He nodded, a genuine smile flickering. I know that now. Ironically, thanks to Allison. If she hadn't come in and turned everything upside down, I might never have confronted that fear. I might never have realized I was already enough. As the first heavy raindrops began to fall, I felt a quiet peace settle between us. An understanding that sometimes the fiercest storms bring the most necessary changes. For me, the change came more gradually, but no less profoundly. After decades of defining myself almost solely through motherhood and sacrifice, I began to rediscover parts of myself long forgotten. I returned to painting a passion abandoned when Gabriel was small because I lacked time and money. I started with little watercolors, then moved to larger canvases, letting color and form express what words could not. The first time Gabriel saw one of my finished pieces, he stood in the doorway of the spare room I had turned into a studio, eyes wide. "Mom, this is incredible. I had no idea you could paint like this." I grinned playfully. "There's a lot about me you don't know." And it was true. Parts of Sandra, the woman, not just the mother, were finally awakening after a long sleep. With Clara's encouragement, I also joined a support group for women who had survived trauma or major life transitions. At first, I only went to listen, shy about sharing my own story. But slowly, I found my voice. More importantly, I found a community of women who knew what it meant to be tested to the limit and still stand tall. Through that group, I met Teresa, a psychologist specializing in helping people rebuild after toxic relationships. After hearing my story, she offered something unexpected. "Sandra, have you ever thought about using your experience to help others? We have a mentorship program for women going through similar situations, and I think you'd be an extraordinary mentor." The thought that my pain could be repurposed into strength for someone else lit a fire inside me. I began training under Teresa, learning how to support others without losing myself in the process. 6 months after the case closed, I had my very first official session with a small group of women. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my notes, but once I started speaking, the words flowed on their own. "My name is Sandra. For most of my life, I thought love meant erasing myself, that strength meant enduring in silence. But I was wrong." Eyes watched me closely, some showing scars that were still raw, others hiding them better, but all filled with empathy. Real strength isn't about how much suffering you can take quietly. It's about knowing when to speak up, when to set boundaries, when to say, "No, this is not acceptable." And sometimes, strength is found in asking for help when you want. I need it most. As I spoke, I realized I wasn't just helping them. I was reminding myself that my dignity mattered just as much as anyone else's, that real love never demands you make yourself smaller, and that even after 50, there's still time to discover new parts of who you are. Gabriel was waiting outside the hall with a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. When I walked out, surrounded by women eager to share their stories, I caught the proud look in my son's eyes. "How was it?" he asked once I had said my goodbyes. "Life-changing," I admitted, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in so long for them and for myself. On the drive home, we spoke of the future, something that had once seemed impossible in the darkest days with Allison's family. Gabriel began to dream about opening his own law practice, focusing on helping victims of financial fraud. And I thought about going back to school, maybe taking a counseling program to strengthen the mentorship I had started. "You know what the best part is?" Gabriel asked as we stopped at a red light. "A year ago, we were just trying to survive, and now we're actually living." His words captured exactly what we had been through. What seemed like a crisis meant to destroy us had instead forced us both to grow in ways we never expected. That evening, I sat alone in the little room I had turned into a studio and started a new painting, not of the storm we had survived, but of the dawn that follows it. Warm colors of hope and renewal stretching across the horizon. As my brush moved across the canvas, I remembered Allison's cruel whisper the night before the wedding that never happened. Starting tomorrow, you'll be nothing but the past for this family. She had been right, but not in the way she thought. That tomorrow never came. Instead, another future unfolded, one she could never have imagined, and one I had never dared to dream. A future where I was not baggage in my son's life, but a woman who had reclaimed her own strength. A future where the bond between me and Gabriel, tested to its very limit, had not only survived but grown stronger and healthier than ever. The scars we carried were no longer marks of shame but badges of survival. As I watched the colors blend on the canvas, my heart filled with gratitude not just for the dawn itself, but for the price we had paid to reach it. A heavy price, but worth it. It's been a year since I painted that first sunrise. The canvas now hangs in our living room, a daily reminder that darkness always yields to light. Time, the quiet teacher of change, had done its healing work, not erasing scars, but weaving them into the fabric of our lives. Gabriel grew in ways that filled me with pride I could hardly put into words. He did open his own practice, small but quickly growing, specializing in helping victims of financial scams and legal manipulation. The work gave him a sense of purpose that his old job never had. Watching him turn his pain into motivation to help others made me realize just how extraordinary a man he had become. At a recent Sunday dinner, our new sacred tradition, he said, "Each case is different, but the pattern is the same. People taken advantage of by those who should have protected them. I see your face in every client, Mom, and I remember why I chose this path." As for me, my own journey expanded in ways I hadn't expected. My mentorship work grew. I began speaking regularly at community centers, women's shelters, even a few local colleges. My message went beyond my personal story, touching on bigger themes: the imbalance of power in relationships, the warning signs of emotional manipulation, the importance of holding on to your identity even in the closest bonds. I even finished my counseling program. At 53, I sat in classrooms alongside 20-year-olds, hungry for knowledge with a thirst only life experience can ignite. At first, I felt out of place, embarrassed to be starting over so late. But then I realized my perspective was valued by both professors and students. One 22-year-old told me after a class, "You've lived what we're only reading about. That gives everything so much more depth." Art stayed with me too, a refuge for the days when words weren't enough. My little studio grew into a larger space, walls now filled with color and emotion. Some paintings were dark, echoing the deepest parts of the journey. Others burst with light and possibility. 6 months ago, a local gallery invited me to exhibit in a group show on art and healing. The opening night felt like a dream. To see strangers standing before my paintings, finding their own meanings in the colors I had poured from my heart, it was indescribable. Gabriel stayed by my side the whole evening, quiet but supportive. At one point, I caught him standing for several minutes before a painting I had created during the darkest days of the trial. Shades of deep blue and purple, with just one small streak of yellow on the horizon. "That's exactly what it felt like, isn't it?" he whispered, eyes fixed on the canvas. "Like drowning, holding on to just one tiny thread of hope." I nodded, surprised by his understanding. "Yes, that's exactly it." He turned to me then, admiration shining in his eyes. "You've always been stronger than I thought, stronger than even you knew." Those words stayed with me, soothing me in moments when old doubts tried to resurface. As for Allison and her family, they disappeared almost entirely from our lives. Later, I heard through acquaintances that they had moved to another state. Sometimes news would trickle back someone spotted them on a work trip, or an old friend of Allison's still kept in touch. Each time, I felt a mix of emotions, echoes of old pain, but also a strange gratitude. It sounds contradictory to feel anything but bitterness toward people who tried so hard to destroy you. But the truth is, without that storm, I might have stayed on the sidelines of my own life, defining my worth only by motherhood. Gabriel might have kept chasing an illusion of success that never satisfied him. No, I'll never thank them, I never could. But I thank myself for becoming the woman I am, because I walked through it all. 2 months ago, Gabriel showed up at Sunday dinner with a guest. Camila, an environmental lawyer he had met through a case. At first, old fears stirred inside me. The shadow of Allison still lingered, reminding me how easily I had once been pushed aside. But Camila was not Allison. That became clear within 5 minutes. Where Allison loved to talk about herself, Camila asked thoughtful questions. Where Allison had dismissed me, Camila treated me with warm, natural respect. When I brought out dessert, Camila noticed a small painting hanging in the hallway. "It's beautiful," she said, stepping closer. "The way you captured that light. Did you study art formally?" Embarrassed, I admitted, "Not really. It's just a passion I return to." Camila smiled. "You have real talent. My mother is a curator at a gallery in Denver. She'd love to see your work." After she left, Gabriel and I washed dishes side by side in comfortable silence until he finally asked, "What do you think of her?" He tried to sound casual, but I knew my answer mattered more than anything. I thought carefully before replying. "She seems genuine, present, the kind of person who truly sees others." Gabriel let out a long breath, as though laying down a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Yes, that's exactly how I feel too." "Are you serious about each other?" I asked gently, not wanting to press too hard. "We're taking it slow," he answered, a faint smile on his lips. "We both have complicated pasts, but I think this could be something special." My throat tightened with both hope and fear, the old anxiety never quite gone. Gabriel must have noticed something in my face, because he set the dish aside and took my wet hands in his. "Mom, I learned the hard way. I've learned to recognize red flags, to value substance over appearances, and I will never let anyone cut me off from the people who truly love me again. And that includes you. You'll always be part of my life." His eyes met mine, steady and clear. That night, after Gabriel left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, gazing at the stars. I thought of myself years ago, a young mother cradling her child, wondering when his father would come back. I thought of the sleepless nights, questioning whether I was enough, giving enough, being good enough. If I could go back and speak to that younger woman, I would tell her the sacrifices were worth it, but she mustn't lose herself entirely in them. I would tell her that one day her son would grow into an extraordinary man, not in spite of hardship, but partly because of it. That there would be pain, yes, but also moments of pure joy that made it all worthwhile. And perhaps most importantly, I would tell her that her story would not end with happily ever after, but with kept living, kept growing, kept learning, sometimes stumbling, but always moving forward, stronger together than apart. Just last week, I received an unexpected invitation. A nonprofit supporting women escaping abusive relationships asked me to be the keynote speaker at their annual fundraiser. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The woman who once felt small, easily dismissed, was now being asked to share her hard-won wisdom with hundreds. I accepted, of course. And as I drafted my speech last night, I remembered Allison's cruel whisper before the wedding that never was. Tomorrow, you'll be nothing but the past in this family. She had been wrong, though not in the way I once thought. I am not the past. I am a story still being written, with chapters, unfolding that neither she nor even I could have imagined. At 53, I see possibility where I once saw limits. I see my son thriving on his chosen path, perhaps building a new love founded on respect and genuine admiration. I see my own work touching lives I never dreamed I could reach. I see new dawns waiting to be painted, new stories waiting to be told, new wounds waiting to be turned into wisdom. Looking back, I've come to realize that family isn't always a place of comfort, but real love and connection are what keep us standing in the storm. Wounds may leave scars, but from them we learn to become stronger, more compassionate, and to reclaim our own worth. I no longer see family as a perfect mold to preserve, but as a living journey where people may stumble, lose their way, yet still find each other again through honesty and care. And the greatest truth of all is this: never let anyone or any words convince you that you are small or undeserving. I share this story not only to remember what has passed, but to remind myself and perhaps you that we all hold the power to keep writing our own lives. So, what about you? Have you ever lived through a moment that made you see the true value of love or family? Share it in the comments, because your story might inspire someone else. And if you'd like to walk alongside me on this journey of lessons and emotions, follow along so you don't miss the next story, because who knows, within one of these stories you just might find yourself.